Have you ever wondered what really goes through a man's mind when he loves you? Not just the surface level words he says, not just the gestures you can see, but the hidden thoughts, the silent battles, the emotions he rarely lets anyone else glimpse. Love, when it takes root in a man's heart, transforms the way he thinks, the way he moves, and the way he sees the world. Yet the truth is this: what he thinks in love is often counterintuitive. It doesn't always match the stories we've been told. And because of that, so many women misread the signals, missing the powerful depth of what's really happening inside him. When a man loves, he carries thoughts he doesn't voice. He may look steady on the outside, composed, even distant at times. But inside, there's a storm of questions and longings that reveal how much he truly cares. He may ask himself, am I enough for her? Can I protect what I love? Will she see what I'm trying to show without words? These questions circle his mind, not because he doubts you, but because he treasures what he's found. Love makes him vulnerable in ways that challenge everything he was taught about strength, and that vulnerability is where the truth begins. Think about it. We live in a world that often teaches men to hide their hearts, to be strong, to never show weakness, to hold back tears, to guard emotions, to mask feelings with action. But love changes the rules. Suddenly he feels exposed. He realizes you can see through the walls he's built. That's why his thoughts may seem confusing. He's not thinking about how to win. He's thinking about how not to lose. He's not thinking about control. He's thinking about connection. And that shift rewrites the way he measures himself in the relationship. This is why understanding his inner world matters. If you can grasp what he's really thinking, you hold the key to unlocking a deeper bond. You'll stop misinterpreting his silence. You'll stop mistaking his distance for disinterest. You'll see that beneath the quiet, love has rewired his mind. And suddenly, what felt like confusion becomes clarity. What felt like doubt becomes reassurance. Here's the reward for leaning in and staying with this journey. When you learn what's truly in his thoughts, you gain the power to meet him where he is, not just where he appears to be. You won't get lost in frustration. You won't be left questioning his love when he doesn't say the words you expect. Instead, you'll start noticing the invisible threads he weaves through his actions, through the risks he takes, through the way he shows up even when he doesn't speak. That recognition will change the way you experience love. Stay with this, because by the end, you will not only understand what a man thinks when he loves, you will understand how to recognize devotion even in its quietest forms. You will see the courage hidden in his restraint, the hope behind his plans, the pride in your happiness, and the bravery it takes for him to risk his heart at all. And once you see that, love no longer feels uncertain. It feels steady, grounded, and real. This is where transformation begins. This is where the walls fall, and where the truth about love finally becomes clear. When a man truly loves you, he feels something he doesn't often admit out loud: vulnerability. It may surprise you because on the outside, he might seem steady, confident, even unshakable. But love has a way of piercing through that armor. It reaches the parts of him that no one else can touch. And in that space where strength meets tenderness, he feels both powerful and exposed at the same time. This vulnerability is not weakness. It is, in fact, the greatest evidence of his love. For a man who has been conditioned his whole life to carry himself with control, to protect his emotions from judgment, to never show cracks in his shield, letting himself care for you at this depth is a radical act of courage. His mind begins to wrestle with the thought, she could break me if she wanted to. And yet he stays. He chooses to give you that power because his heart cannot pull away. That is why sometimes he struggles to express what's inside. He may not have the words, or he may fear that his honesty could be misunderstood. But make no mistake, every time he lets you in, every time he lowers his guard, every time he allows you to see the real him, it's because his love outweighs his fear. That's how deeply he values the bond you share. Psychologists have long studied this paradox. Men appear strong, but love activates a primal sensitivity. When they fall deeply, they no longer measure themselves only by success in the outside world. Their sense of worth becomes tied to how safe, happy, and understood you feel with them. This is not about control. It's about connection. It's about proving to themselves that they can be the man who holds space for your dreams, your fears, and your whole being. That thought consumes him, even if he never speaks it aloud. What this means for you is life-changing. When you recognize the hidden vulnerability beneath his strength, you stop mistaking his silence for indifference. You stop confusing his hesitation with distance. Instead, you see it for what it is, the courage to stand unmasked even when it feels terrifying. You begin to understand that when a man loves you, the very thing he hides is also the clearest sign of how deeply he feels. And here is the beauty: once you honor that vulnerability instead of dismissing it, you create a bond that is nearly unbreakable. When he senses that his openness is not being judged but valued, he dares to let more of himself be seen. He shares dreams he usually keeps locked away. He admits fears he's never voiced before. He allows love to transform him, and in doing so, he invites you into the most authentic version of himself. This is why love, in its purest form, is not about perfection or performance. It is about the willingness to be raw, to be seen, to risk rejection and still choose to give. A man in love is not thinking about how to appear flawless. He is thinking about whether he is safe to show you who he really is. That thought lives at the core of his heart, and it shapes every choice he makes in the relationship. So, the next time you look at him and wonder what's really going on inside, remember this truth: love makes him vulnerable, and that vulnerability is the most powerful proof of all. It is not weakness, it is devotion, it is trust. And when you see it clearly, you hold in your hands the very thing that gives love its deepest strength. What most people never realize is that with love comes fear, and for a man, this fear runs deeper than he will ever admit. It is not the kind of fear that shows itself in trembling hands or visible anxiety. It is the silent fear, the one that hides in the back of his mind, whispering questions he cannot quiet. He fears losing the very thing that gives his life meaning. He fears not being enough, not being strong enough, not being able to meet the unspoken expectations he believes love demands of him. And because he does not always put those fears into words, they shape his behavior in ways that are easy to misinterpret. When a man loves you, his greatest fear is losing you. Not simply losing your presence, but losing your trust, your respect, your faith in him. That fear can make him second-guess himself, even in moments where he appears confident. It can make him overthink his actions, worrying if he is giving enough, doing enough, being enough. You might look at him and see steadiness, but inside he is carrying the weight of invisible doubts, all because you matter more than he can explain. This fear does not mean weakness, it means depth. Only someone who loves deeply can feel the possibility of loss so strongly. Only someone who has opened his heart completely can experience the quiet terror of not being able to hold on to what he treasures. Psychology shows us that fear is the shadow of attachment. The more something means, the greater the fear of its absence. So if you ever wonder why he sometimes withdraws, why he seems to retreat into himself, understand this: he may be wrestling with the silent fear of failing the person he loves most. It is important to see this for what it is. Too often this silence is misread as disinterest. Too often his hesitation is mistaken for distance. But in reality, it is the opposite. He is protecting his heart, and he is protecting yours. He fears saying the wrong thing. He fears exposing too much of his insecurity. He fears that in showing his doubts, he might somehow weaken the connection he longs to strengthen. So he holds it inside, carrying a quiet storm that you may never fully see. But here is where the beauty lies. When you begin to recognize this fear not as rejection, but as evidence of how much he cares, the dynamic shifts. You stop taking his pauses personally, and instead you see them as proof of how deeply you matter. You realize that his love is not shallow, it is vast, so vast that the thought of losing it unsettles him to his core. And in that recognition, compassion replaces frustration, connection replaces confusion. Imagine what happens when you create space for him to feel safe with his fears. Imagine how much stronger the bond becomes when he knows that his silence is not judged, but understood. Fear begins to lose its grip. His heart feels freer to open, his thoughts become easier to share, and his love grows stronger because it no longer has to hide behind walls. So when a man loves you, and you sense the hesitation in his eyes, remember this truth: his fear is not a sign that he loves you less. It is a sign that he loves you more than words can ever capture. It is the shadow of devotion, the echo of his deepest care. And when you choose to see that fear as love in disguise, you unlock the doorway to a connection built not just on passion, but on trust, understanding, and unshakable depth. Love awakens an instinct in a man that runs deeper than words can capture. When his heart is tied to yours, he begins to feel a natural pull to protect you, not always in grand dramatic gestures, but in subtle ways that often go unnoticed. He thinks about your safety when you are apart. He worries about whether you feel secure in his presence. He adjusts his actions, sometimes without even realizing it, to shield you from unnecessary pain or struggle. Protection for him is not just a responsibility, it is an expression of love that feels as natural as breathing. This drive is not about control. It is not about superiority. It is about devotion. At the core of his being, he feels an urge to ensure that the person he loves most is safe, physically, emotionally, spiritually. That protective thought becomes a quiet background hum in his mind, influencing decisions and shaping behavior in ways that may never be spoken aloud. He may take the heavier load, step in before you need to ask, or stand silently ready in case you fall. These small, consistent choices are his way of saying, your well-being matters more than my comfort. Psychologists often call this an expression of the provider-protector instinct, but in love, it becomes far more personal. It is not about proving strength to the world. It is about proving devotion to you. It is his heart saying, I will stand between you and what could harm you. I will guard not just your body, but your trust, your spirit, your hope. That thought gives him purpose, and that purpose drives him forward, even when the rest of the world weighs him down. What makes this so powerful is that you may never fully see the inner dialogue he carries. To you, it may look like he is simply fixing something, planning ahead, or paying attention to details that seem small. But inside, these are not small to him. They are his quiet promises in motion. Each act of protection, each silent calculation, each sacrifice of convenience is his way of saying, you matter more than I do in this moment. Love makes him willing to give, and protection becomes the language through which he expresses it. When you begin to notice these moments, the invisible becomes visible. That door he holds open, the way he stands a little closer in unfamiliar places, the effort he makes to reduce your stress, these are not accidents. They are love taking shape through action. And when you acknowledge them, when you recognize the intent behind them, something profound happens. He feels seen. He feels valued not just for his words, but for the quiet devotion that drives him every day. This is why connection deepens when love is recognized in all its forms. Words are beautiful, but actions rooted in protection reveal something even greater. They reveal loyalty. They reveal presence. They reveal the truth that he is not just thinking about himself anymore. His mind now moves with you at the center, and that shift is the clearest signal of how deeply he feels. So when you catch those moments of subtle care, remember that they are not random. They are windows into his heart. They are proof that his love is not passive. It is active, intentional, and alive. And the more you see it, the more you will realize that his protection is not about walls or barriers. It is about creating a world where you feel safe enough to grow, to dream, to be yourself fully. That is the quiet power of love in motion, and it speaks louder than any words ever could. Love also places on a man's shoulders a weight that is rarely seen but constantly felt. When his heart belongs to you, he begins to carry an unspoken responsibility. He feels it not because you demand it, but because love itself plants it deep inside him. He starts to believe that your happiness, your stability, your sense of safety somehow rests on his ability to provide, to lead, to stand strong, even when life feels uncertain. And while he may not confess this openly, it is a constant pressure that shapes the way he thinks, acts, and moves through each day. This invisible responsibility can feel heavy. It is not always rational, yet it feels inescapable to him. He tells himself, I must be enough. I must make sure she has what she needs. I must keep moving forward even when I feel like I am breaking. These are the quiet promises he makes in his mind, often without ever putting them into words. And because of them, he will sometimes seem distant, not because he cares less, but because the weight of love has him silently carrying battles he doesn't want to burden you with. What makes this responsibility powerful is that it comes from devotion, not obligation. He does not carry it as a chore, he carries it as proof of love. The thought of failing you cuts deeper than the thought of failing himself. He may struggle under pressure in his own life, but when it comes to you, he pushes harder, he fights longer, and he gives more than he knew he had. His mind becomes wired around the idea of creating security, because to him, security is love translated into reality. Yet here lies the counterintuitive truth. The very responsibility that makes him fight for you can also make him retreat from you. When he feels he is falling short, when he feels the weight pressing too heavily, his instinct may be to withdraw, to work harder in silence, to try to fix everything alone. It is not rejection, it is his way of protecting you from the burden he carries inside. But in that silence, many women misinterpret the truth, thinking he has grown cold when in fact he is burning himself out, trying to live up to the standard love has placed in his heart. The transformation happens when you begin to see this invisible responsibility not as distance but as devotion. When you realize that behind the quiet, behind the heavy sighs, behind the long hours of effort, there is a man thinking, "I cannot let her down," you stop doubting his love. You begin to understand that his commitment is not only in the easy moments, but in the hidden battles you never see. And in that understanding, you find a new level of respect, one that allows him to feel safe enough to share more openly, because at his core, what he wants is not perfection. What he wants is to be recognized for the effort, the sacrifice, the determination he pours into love. And when you see that, when you honor that invisible weight instead of overlooking it, you lift a piece of the burden. You remind him that love is not about carrying it all alone, but about walking through it together. That simple recognition transforms responsibility from a weight into a shared bond, and it turns silent pressure into visible proof that love is real, enduring, and worth every sacrifice. There are moments when, despite the depth of his love, he pulls away. This is one of the most confusing experiences for someone on the receiving end of his devotion, because it feels counter to everything his heart has already shown. One day he is present, protective, carrying the weight of responsibility with visible intention, and the next he seems distant, quieter, less reachable. To many, this withdrawal feels like rejection, but the truth is often far different. When a man truly loves, pulling away is rarely about a lack of care. It is about managing the intensity of the emotions he carries inside. Love challenges his identity. It forces him to confront fears of inadequacy, to wrestle with doubts he never had to face when his heart was untouched. In those moments, he sometimes needs space to process. His retreat is not always about you. It is about the storm inside him. He pulls back because he does not want to expose you to the chaos of his insecurity. He distances himself to find balance, to regain composure, to ensure that when he steps back toward you, he is able to give from a place of strength rather than from fractured uncertainty. Psychology explains this as a common cycle of intimacy. When love grows too intense, the human mind naturally seeks a pause, a moment to recalibrate. For a man raised to guard his emotions, this instinct can be stronger. The paradox is clear. The closer he feels to you, the more he risks losing control of the carefully constructed image he has carried his whole life. And so he steps back, not because he loves less, but because he loves so much that he fears mishandling it. The mistake many make is to chase him in those moments, to demand immediate reassurance. But what actually rebuilds trust and connection is patience. When you allow space without panic, when you remain steady instead of questioning his every move, he feels something powerful, safety. He realizes that he does not have to perform constantly to hold your heart. He learns that your love has the strength to withstand the waves of his uncertainty. That knowledge transforms him because it gives him permission to return not with guilt, but with gratitude. His pulling away is not the end of love. It is part of its rhythm. Just as the tide pulls back before it surges forward again, so too does his heart need room to breathe before it can love more deeply. If you can see his withdrawal not as abandonment but as recalibration, you will uncover a truth that changes everything. He is not leaving you. He is protecting the bond by taking a moment to steady himself inside of it. And when he comes back with more clarity, more intention, and more determination. Each return is proof that the bond matters more to him than his comfort. Each return shows that love is not about constant closeness, but about trust that survives distance. Recognizing this pattern frees you from fear because you no longer interpret space as loss. Instead, you see it as part of the process through which love deepens and matures. So when he pulls away, hold on to this truth. Distance in love does not always mean disconnection. Often it is the very act that allows connection to grow stronger. And when you meet that space with trust instead of panic, you create the foundation for a love that withstands not only the closeness, but also the spaces in between. That is how love proves its endurance, not just in moments of passion, but in moments of pause. What drives him back after those moments of distance is something far deeper than habit or obligation. It is the quiet pride he feels in your happiness. For a man in love, your joy becomes a reflection of his own worth. He measures himself not by titles or possessions when his heart belongs to you, but by the light in your eyes, by the peace in your presence, by the way you move through the world knowing you are supported. Your happiness becomes the compass that guides his choices, the silent confirmation that he is succeeding in the role love has called him into. This is not about control or dependency. It is about connection. When he sees you thrive, when he notices your smile after a hard day, when he feels your energy lifted instead of weighed down, it feeds something inside him that nothing else can touch. That pride is not ego, it is devotion. It is the feeling of knowing that his presence in your life matters. And even when he doesn't articulate it, he is constantly scanning, constantly aware, asking himself, is she okay? Is she at peace? Does she feel valued with me? Psychology teaches us that love reshapes identity. For men especially, attachment often shifts their center of gravity from self to partner. Where once achievement was measured by external markers of success, now it is also measured by relational fulfillment. He feels accomplished not only when he conquers challenges outside, but when he senses harmony within the bond he shares with you. In many ways, you become his greatest mirror, reflecting back to him whether his love is landing, whether his efforts are being felt. This is why your happiness holds such weight in his mind. It is not that he believes he alone is responsible for it. Deep down, he knows joy comes from within, but he cannot help but tie his own sense of value to the role he plays in it. And so, when you radiate peace, it strengthens him. When you grow, it inspires him. When you find fulfillment, it confirms to him that his love is building, not breaking. That confirmation fuels his determination to keep showing up, even when life challenges him. Understanding this unlocks something profound. When you acknowledge his contribution to your happiness, even in small ways, it does not just flatter him, it anchors him. It reassures him that the silent calculations he makes, the sacrifices he chooses, the protective instincts he follows are not invisible. And when he feels seen in that way, his love expands. He does not retreat into doubt. He steps forward with more certainty, more courage, more willingness to give. Your happiness to him is proof of purpose. It reassures him that his vulnerability was not misplaced, that his fears are worth confronting, that his devotion is not wasted. And when you realize this, when you stop seeing his quiet pride as mere male ego and start recognizing it as love translated into identity, the entire relationship shifts. You no longer question his motives. You no longer search anxiously for constant verbal reassurance. You begin to notice that the surest way to read his heart is not in what he says, but in how deeply he celebrates the light within you. So when you smile and he watches just a little too long, when you share good news and he glows with a satisfaction bigger than the moment itself, know this, in those quiet seconds, he is telling you everything you need to know. He is thinking, her happiness is my proof. Her peace is my pride. Her joy is my success. And in that thought lies the depth of his love, the kind of love that measures its worth not in what it takes, but in how much it gives. Yet even as your happiness fills him with pride, love stirs a conflict inside him that he cannot always resolve easily. It is the battle between his ego and his heart. His ego whispers that he must remain in control, that he must not appear weak, that he must guard his independence at all costs. But his heart pulls him in the opposite direction, urging him to surrender, to soften, to risk showing the parts of himself that ego has tried so hard to protect. This tension is one of the most powerful struggles a man faces when he loves, because love challenges everything he was taught about strength. Ego thrives on self-preservation. It tells him to protect his image, to avoid embarrassment, to maintain dominance. But love dismantles those walls. It forces him to consider something greater than himself. Suddenly, being right matters less than being connected. Winning an argument feels hollow compared to keeping your trust. Pride loses its shine when weighed against the risk of wounding the person he loves most. And so, within his mind, a shift begins to happen. the battle between appearing strong and actually being strong enough to love fully. This inner conflict is not always visible. From the outside, it may look like silence during disagreements, hesitation to admit mistakes, or reluctance to express emotions openly. But inside, his thoughts are loud. He asks himself, do I hold on to my pride, or do I let her see my flaws? Do I protect my ego, or do I protect the bond we've built? These questions cut deep because for many men, ego has been their armor their entire lives. Love forces them to decide whether to lay that armor down. When a man chooses love over ego, something profound happens. He begins to discover a new definition of strength. Strength is no longer about control. It becomes about vulnerability. It is no longer about winning. It becomes about listening. It is no longer about standing taller. It becomes about kneeling lower when love requires humility. This transformation is not easy, but it is one of the clearest signs that his heart has taken the lead. What makes this conflict powerful for you to understand is that it explains so many of his seemingly contradictory actions. When he resists opening up, it is not because he does not care, it is because his ego is fighting to survive. When he finally admits fear, doubt, or longing, it is because his heart has gained ground. And every time his heart wins, love grows stronger, because he has chosen connection over protection, intimacy over image. Your role in this conflict is not to demand that he abandon his ego instantly, but to create the space where his heart feels safe enough to rise above it. When he realizes that he will not be diminished for showing weakness, when he learns that admitting imperfection will not cost him respect, the battle shifts. His heart gains courage, his love grows freer, his connection with you deepens because he no longer has to hide behind a mask. This is the essence of transformation in love, the surrender of ego to the greater truth of the heart. Every time he allows love to humble him, he takes another step into a deeper, more authentic bond. And when you recognize this struggle for what it is, not rejection, not indifference, but the very fight that love demands, you stop questioning his devotion. You begin to see that behind every hesitation is a man learning to choose his heart over his pride. And that choice, repeated over time, is the truest victory love can ever claim. When his heart begins to win over his pride, his mind naturally shifts toward the future. Love pulls him into a state of vision, where his thoughts are no longer anchored only in the present moment, but in what can be built, created, and protected in the days ahead. He may not speak of it openly, he may not outline plans with clarity, but deep inside he begins to imagine a life that includes you in every detail. This is not a fleeting fantasy. It is a quiet architecture of the future forming in his mind. He starts thinking about stability, about direction, about what it means to create something lasting. His thoughts go beyond attraction and companionship. They begin to weave you into his long-term decisions even when he doesn't call attention to it. He may think of how his career choices will affect you, how his lifestyle aligns with what you deserve, how his goals can make space for your dreams as well. This mental planning is not always visible, but it is real. It is his way of silently saying, I see you in my tomorrow, not just in my today. Psychologists describe this as investment behavior. When a man's love deepens, his sense of identity expands to include the person he loves. The decisions he makes are no longer just about his individual survival or growth. They are about collective flourishing. He carries your presence into his choices, whether he voices it or not. And this is counterintuitive because while he may seem distant at times, his distance may actually be filled with thoughts of how to secure a future where love can thrive. This is why it is so important not to misinterpret his silence. When he is quiet, he may not be disengaged. He may be calculating, planning, envisioning. He may be holding unspoken dreams close to his chest because he wants to be sure he can turn them into reality before speaking them aloud. To you, it may feel like absence, but to him, it is presence projected forward. It is his mind working ahead to create space for the life he hopes to give you. The beauty of this lies in what it reveals about devotion. True love is not only about passion in the moment. It is about foresight, about responsibility, about planting seeds that will grow into something greater than the two of you standing still. His willingness to think beyond himself, to imagine a shared tomorrow, is a sign that love has expanded his mind as well as his heart. When you begin to notice the subtle ways this shows up, you gain clarity, the way he works harder than before, the way he saves without drawing attention to it, the way he speaks about possibilities instead of only present comforts. These are signals of a man whose love has moved into vision. They are signals that he is no longer thinking only in terms of moments, but in terms of legacy. And here is the reward. When you recognize this quiet planning, you release yourself from doubt. You stop questioning whether his love is shallow because you see that it is building, preparing, rooting itself in permanence. And when he feels that you see it, that you honor his silent vision for the future, his confidence in the relationship grows. His love strengthens because it is no longer only his dream. It becomes a dream you both carry. That is how love moves from fleeting passion to unshakable foundation, and that is the space where transformation begins to take hold. Even as he envisions a future with you, there is a part of him that still seeks reassurance in ways that are not always obvious. Love makes him want to know if the bond can withstand pressure, silence, or misunderstanding. He may not do this consciously, yet he finds himself testing whether the connection is as strong as it feels. Sometimes it shows up in moments of quiet, when he steps back to see if you will step closer. Other times it emerges in teasing or subtle conflict, not to push you away, but to see if love remains steady when challenged. These tests are not games, they are survival instincts born from the deep fear of loss. At the core of this lies an unspoken question: is this love safe? When a man loves deeply, he gives up control over one of the most vulnerable parts of himself. And because of that, his mind searches for confirmation that he is not risking everything in vain. It may seem counterintuitive, but by creating small disruptions, by allowing tension or distance, he is looking for evidence that the foundation will not crumble. He wants to know that what he is building is resilient, not fragile. Psychologists recognize this as a form of attachment testing, a deeply human impulse to ensure that emotional bonds can survive strain. For men, it often appears less in words and more in behavior. He may grow quiet, he may challenge your perspective, or he may act less expressive for a time. It is not about rejection, it is about measuring stability. He is asking, without speaking, will you still be here? Will this love still hold even if I falter? The mistake is to take these moments personally, to assume they mean a lack of love or a lack of care. In truth, they reveal how much he values the bond. If love meant little, he would not need to test it. But because it matters more than he can explain, his mind wrestles with the need for certainty. He does not want to pour his entire heart into something that could vanish. He does not want to expose the most vulnerable parts of himself without knowing that they are safe in your hands. What transforms everything is when you begin to see these tests not as threats, but as opportunities, when you respond with steadiness instead of panic, when you show patience instead of anger. You give him the confirmation he is searching for. You prove that love does not collapse under pressure but endures. And once he sees that, once he feels the bond survive the moments of silence, conflict, or distance, his trust deepens. He realizes that he does not have to guard himself endlessly because the connection has proven its strength. This is the paradox of love. The moments that feel most uncertain are often the very moments that prepare the relationship to grow stronger. Every test, whether intentional or unconscious, is a doorway to deeper trust. And when you walk through that doorway with grace, you unlock a new level of intimacy. You show him that love is not fragile glass but unshakable steel, able to withstand storms and still stand firm. So when he pulls back, when he challenges, when he creates moments that feel confusing, remember the truth beneath the surface. He is not searching for reasons to leave. He is searching for reasons to believe. And when you meet those moments with strength, you give him what his heart longs for most, the certainty that his love is safe and that his future is not being built on sand but on rock. That realization is what allows him to surrender more fully, to give more completely, and to love without fear. When a man feels that his love is safe, his thoughts begin to shift from protection to contribution. He no longer wonders only if the relationship can endure. He begins to ask how he can make it flourish. This is when his mind turns toward the idea of provision, not just in the material sense, but in the deeper ways that matter most to love. He begins to think of how he can add to your life, how he can lighten your burdens, how he can create joy that reaches beyond ordinary moments. His love transforms into a desire to give, because giving becomes the purest proof of what he feels. It is not always expressed through grand gestures. Often it is found in the small details he notices, the subtle ways he adjusts, the quiet efforts he makes without needing recognition. His mind starts to scan for opportunities to show that you matter, to demonstrate that your happiness has become part of his responsibility. He may think about your comfort when you are not around. He may anticipate your needs before you voice them. He may plan his actions with an awareness of how they will affect your heart. This is not obligation, it is devotion woven into thought. Psychologists call this the shift from self-centered motivation to partner-oriented care. When love deepens, the reward is no longer just personal satisfaction, but shared well-being. A man who truly loves begins to experience happiness most strongly when he sees you thrive. His inner dialogue changes. It is no longer, what do I get, but rather, what can I give? How can I make her world brighter? These questions begin to run silently in his mind, guiding the choices he makes in ways you may never see directly, but will always feel. And yet, this drive to provide is not simply about practical support, it is about significance. He wants to know that his presence in your life matters. He wants to know that he is not just beside you, but actively lifting you higher. It is not pride, it is purpose. For a man, love without the chance to contribute often feels incomplete. His mind searches for proof that he is not replaceable, that his efforts make a difference, that his love is not passive, but powerful. When you recognize this, you unlock a profound truth. One of the greatest ways to strengthen love is not only to receive what he gives, but to let him know that it matters. Appreciation, acknowledgement, even the smallest words of gratitude feed his sense of meaning, and meaning is what fuels his devotion. When he knows that his care is seen and valued, he is inspired to give more, not out of duty, but out of joy. He feels alive in the act of loving, and that aliveness only deepens the bond between you. This is why the most enduring love stories are not built on passion alone, but on partnership. They are sustained by the countless ways two people give to each other's lives, creating a rhythm of contribution that never stops. When a man loves you, his mind is not only consumed with desire, it is filled with plans to add to your existence, to stand as a source of strength, to be more than just someone who walks beside you. He wants to be the one who helps carry you, celebrate you, and build with you. That is the transformation that love demands. A shift from consuming to creating, from receiving to giving, from fear to purpose. And when he reaches this point, his love is no longer just a feeling. It becomes a force that shapes both your lives in ways neither of you could achieve alone. As his love takes root in giving, another thought begins to take hold. He wonders if he is enough. Not enough in the shallow sense of wealth or appearance, but enough in the deeper sense of worth. A man in love silently asks himself if he can truly measure up to the gift of being loved by you. This quiet question shapes his actions more than he admits. It pushes him to grow, to improve, to stretch beyond his comfort zone. Love awakens in him the awareness that your presence deserves the best version of who he can be, and his mind begins to wrestle with whether he can rise to meet that calling. This is not insecurity as much as it is reverence. When a man truly loves, he does not take the connection lightly. He looks at you and sees someone whose value changes the way he sees his own life. And in that recognition, he feels the weight of responsibility. The thought that drives him is not, am I perfect? But rather, can I be enough for her heart? Can I live up to the love she deserves? These questions are not signs of weakness, they are signs of depth. They reveal that his love is not casual, but sacred in his mind. This is why love often becomes the greatest motivator for transformation. Studies in psychology show that when people tie their goals to someone they cherish, their persistence increases, their resilience grows, and their willingness to change multiplies. For a man in love, self-improvement stops being just about him. It becomes about honoring the bond he treasures. He wants his presence in your life to be a blessing, not a burden. He wants to be a source of stability, not uncertainty. This thought becomes the fuel behind his growth. But here lies the counterintuitive truth. The more he questions if he is enough, the more he proves how deeply he loves, because only someone who cares profoundly would even wrestle with that question. Indifference never asks, am I worthy? Only devotion does. And the moment you see that, you begin to realize that his striving is not rooted in pride, it is rooted in love. He wants to rise because he loves. He wants to improve because he values. He wants to give more because he cannot imagine giving less when it comes to you. The beauty is that love, when met with reassurance, transforms these doubts into power. When you show him that he does not need perfection, only presence, his mind rests. When you let him know that his efforts mean more than flawless results, he breathes easier. And in that safety, his energy to grow expands even more. He is no longer driven by fear of not being enough, but by the joy of being seen as he is and still being cherished. That joy multiplies his commitment because he realizes he is loved not for what he might become, but for what he already is, even as he continues to grow. This balance between his inner desire to rise and your reassurance that he is already enough creates a love that strengthens over time. It is not built on illusions of perfection, but on the reality of shared humanity. A man in love thinks often about his worth, not because he doubts the connection, but because he honors it. And in honoring it, he becomes more. Love challenges him, shapes him, and calls him higher. And as he rises, he discovers that being enough is not about flawless achievement, but about wholehearted devotion, day after day, moment after moment. When a man loves you, his thoughts turn toward the future in ways he may not even express out loud. Love reshapes his imagination. He begins to see time differently, not just as a sequence of days, but as a canvas that could be painted with you beside him. His mind lingers on possibilities, on the life that could unfold if the bond you share deepens and lasts. And though he may not always articulate it, the truth is clear. His love makes him think about building, not just existing. This vision does not always show itself in grand plans or dramatic statements. Sometimes it comes in the quiet way he saves a detail about something you once said because he is already picturing how to weave it into the years ahead. Sometimes it shows in the way he looks at places or experiences with a thought of whether you would enjoy them too. He begins to measure not only the present moment, but the potential of what can grow from it. In his love, time becomes not something to survive, but something to design, and every design he imagines includes you. Psychology calls this future orientation, a mental habit where the brain projects forward, setting goals and aligning choices with the life one desires. When a man loves deeply, his mind naturally begins to engage in this orientation. He starts to think in terms of legacy rather than impulse, in terms of continuity rather than convenience. He wants to know that what he is building today will matter tomorrow, because tomorrow is no longer abstract. It has your face, your voice, your presence in it. This does not mean he expects certainty or that he has every detail figured out. What it means is that his mind is no longer focused only on himself. The question shifts from what do I want to what can we create together? That subtle but powerful change drives his decisions. He might consider how his career choices affect the stability he can provide. He might think about where he lives with the awareness of what it would mean for both of you. He may even weigh risks differently because the stakes are no longer his alone. They belong to the bond you share. And yet, this future orientation is not only about external plans, it is about emotional investment. He begins to think about the kind of man he must become if he is to walk with you into that future. He wonders how he can deepen his patience, strengthen his character, refine his habits. His mind is not content with simply arriving at the future. He wants to arrive prepared, ready to honor the love that carried him there. Love awakens a deeper sense of accountability, because the thought of tomorrow with you makes him want to rise today. The counterintuitive truth is that when he loves you, the future is not about certainty, but about direction. He does not think in terms of guarantees, but in terms of intention. His thoughts are not consumed with securing an unshakable plan, but with choosing you as the person worth shaping his path around. And that choice, again and again, is what gives his future meaning. When you understand this, you see the depth of his love more clearly. It is not only in the words he speaks now, but in the silent way he carries you into tomorrow in his imagination. He loves not just by holding you in this moment, but by picturing you in moments that have not yet arrived. And in that vision, he reveals a truth that no passing feeling could ever create. His love is not confined to today, it is already reaching toward forever. When a man truly loves you, one of the most striking shifts in his thinking is how much weight he gives to your happiness. It's not just that he cares about how you feel in a passing moment, but that your emotions begin to matter to him in a way that redefines his choices and priorities. He starts to notice the little things, the subtle signals, the unspoken cues that reveal what lifts your spirit and what burdens your heart. And without always needing to say it, he is thinking about how to protect that happiness, nurture it, and ensure it has space to grow. Love rewires the brain toward empathy. Neurological research shows that when people form deep bonds, their brains begin mirroring each other's emotional states. This is why his joy feels incomplete if you are hurting, and why your laughter can lift him even on his darkest days. When he loves you, his thoughts are not separated from yours. He carries your feelings within him almost as if they were his own. And this connection drives him to think about what he can do to be a source of light rather than a source of pain. This is not about perfection. He knows he will make mistakes. He knows he cannot shield you from every hardship. But what shapes his thinking is intention. His mind turns again and again toward questions like, am I lifting her or am I weighing her down? Am I helping her become who she wants to be, or am I pulling her away from her true path? Love makes him ask these questions not out of insecurity but out of responsibility. Because to him, your happiness is not a luxury, it becomes part of his mission. The counterintuitive truth is that his love is not only about what he feels, but about what he wants you to feel. He is not only focused on how deeply you affect his heart, but on how he can affect yours. This shift is powerful because it shows that love at its core is outward-looking. It is not a craving to be fulfilled, but a devotion to give. And when a man's mind is shaped by this devotion, every decision he makes is touched by it. He thinks about the tone of his words because he knows careless phrases can leave deep wounds. He thinks about his presence because he understands that absence at the wrong time can leave scars. He thinks about the effort he invests, not because he is chasing approval, but because he has realized that your smile, your peace, your sense of being loved, these are treasures he wants to guard. Love expands his awareness, reminding him again and again that his choices do not exist in isolation. They ripple into your life, and because you matter to him, he wants those ripples to bring calm, not chaos. And beyond actions, love reshapes his inner dialogue. He thinks not only about who you are today, but about the kind of environment he can help create for you to flourish tomorrow. He does not just want to witness your growth, he wants to contribute to it. His mind is not just full of affection, it is full of hope for your becoming. That is why, when a man loves you, his thinking reveals something profound. Your happiness becomes his compass. It guides him in ways he may never fully put into words. It drives him to stretch, to sacrifice, to rise into a version of himself that is more generous, more attentive, more devoted than he ever thought possible. And in that devotion, you see the real evidence of love, not just in what he feels, but in how deeply he thinks of you. When a man loves you, another profound shift happens in the way he thinks about time. Time is no longer measured only by his ambitions, his deadlines, or his personal goals. It becomes something he weighs against you, something he values because it can be shared with you, invested in you, and aligned with you. This is not about grand gestures alone, but about the quiet recalibration of priorities that reveals where his heart truly lives. His thoughts begin to stretch into the future, not as a solitary vision, but as a shared horizon where your presence is the constant he does not want to lose. Love alters the way his mind views the moments in between. He begins to think not just about the milestones, but about the daily rhythm of life and how you fit within it. Every man knows that time is the one resource he can never earn back, and when he loves you, he is thinking consciously about how to use it in ways that strengthen the bond between you. He considers the balance between his responsibilities and his devotion, because he knows that neglect is not neutral, it erodes connection. And so he finds himself wanting to be present, to carve out spaces where the world falls away and it is just the two of you. The counterintuitive truth is that he may not always express this desire in words, but it lives in the way he guards those shared moments. He may reschedule commitments, change routines, or adjust his habits because his thoughts are no longer centered only on efficiency but on intimacy. Time with you becomes less of an option and more of a necessity, a grounding force that keeps him aligned with what matters most. Psychology reveals that when we deeply bond with another person, our perception of time itself changes. Experiences feel richer, more vibrant, more memorable. A man in love thinks about this without even realizing it. He seeks to create moments with you that endure in memory, because on some level he understands that love is not built on years alone, but on the depth of the moments that fill them. His mind becomes occupied with the small rituals, the conversations before sleep, the laughter during a meal, the silence shared on a walk. These become markers of meaning to him, moments where he feels fully alive because you are there. And what makes this so powerful is that time becomes a mirror of his commitment. Anyone can claim love with words, but when he chooses again and again to give you his time, it reveals what his heart already knows. His thoughts shift from, "What do I need to do for myself?" to "What do I want to build with her?" This does not mean he abandons his individuality, but rather that his individuality now flows into partnership. His dreams stretch wider because they now include you, and in his mind, the future becomes less about what he achieves alone and more about what you experience together. This is why, when a man loves you, his thoughts about time carry a different weight. He thinks not only about the hours he has, but about how those hours can create a legacy of connection. He thinks about how to build a rhythm where you feel valued, secure, and prioritized. He thinks about how every choice to give you time is really a choice to say, "Without words, you matter more than anything else I could be doing." And in this, you see the depth of his love, not just in how he feels in fleeting moments, but in how he thinks about the life he wants to live with you.